Welcome. I'm going to give the floor to Laura Blob. She's the Director of Cooperation for Latin America and the Caribbean from our agency, and we are lucky enough to have her. Thank you very much. Yes, indeed. I don't know if it's your honor or our honor to have this event here for the presentation of a compared analysis for care policies for reference countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. And I think it's an honor because we have seen many faces here that we know, many people that work with us. So very commonly it's us who travel. So it's a pleasure to have you here, but it's also a luxury and a pleasure because of the topic we're going to be dealing with in this session. In the cooperation agency, we have set on the table the topic of care in the bi-regional field. We wanted to foster having a discussion on this specific topic because we think it's very important for everything that has to do with what we do with Spain and Latin America and the Caribbean. So what we wanted to foster firstly was to discuss the approach of care, this bi-regional discussion on this summit, EU CELAC, specifically with this discussion with the civil society. It's something that for us has been a priority, and it's still a priority for several reasons, as I say. For the importance of bi-regional dialogue, for it to be focusing on aspects that for us are essential, and also for everything that has a consequence when we talk about care. In the previous months to this EU CELAC discussion, we organized a specific dialogue in the Montevideo Center with many of you and using all the knowledge that you already have on this field. And we came up with topics that were very interesting, and I wanted to highlight a few, especially. First of all, how we talk about and how we see the topic of care at the other side of the Atlantic, the treatment for that, what's the approach and the necessary relationship and the necessary discussion and dialogue for these two approaches. It's interesting to talk about the right to care and to be taken care of for everything that it implies from the moment in which acknowledging care as a right has to have a response from institutions. So that's why we can work together and collaborate with our partners in a collaboration topic on how we give that response. The second essential element in which we're talking in Latin America and the Caribbean is the topic of consensus, a pact, a contract, a society in which care and being taken care of our rights has to have a previous consensus and agreement on how we're going to do that and how we're going to fund this kind of society. And there is no other way to do that than having a dialogue, having a consensus, and trying to reach an agreement on the kind of society that we want. We're working on dialogue, we're working in consensus, not only in this field, and we're working also in tax matters. So care for us has crucial importance for us when it comes to tackling these matters. Also because the models for care allow us a comprehensive and intersectorial approach that we talk so often about in our agency, how we can reach a goal from different approaches, from different perspectives. The care model touches on social protection, on urban design, on healthcare, and gender. And as you all know, all these topics are essential in the kind of cooperation that we do from the Spanish Agency for Cooperation. In the surveys for how we use our time, we have revealed that women use 3 times the time men use for care. Most countries, care is feminized, and we associate that with the work of women, and there's a defeminization would be an important advance for the situation of women in every country. So for us to work in that perspective and the incidence that has on gender also has an essential importance. That's why we're linking that essentially to the instruments, or we have associated that to instruments that from our agency we're fostering in order to be working on gender matters. Probably you already know Ellas Más sectorial fund, and they have recently incorporated a line for care with to the one they already had, which was the fostering of the political participation of women. Lastly, in the network of Interconecta and the promotion centers, we're talking about action with different actors in what we have called spaces for collective intelligence, and we're creating a specific one to reflect on the care matter. Basically, what I wanted to say with this, besides saying welcome to all of you, what I wanted to say was that working on this and debating this and analyzing on this, it has an incidence on many of the fields that we work on as an agency. I'm sure that this analysis will help us to reflect beyond this and to define specific projects beyond what we've done so far to tackle these topics. And because of that, precisely, that's why we were interested in having you all here and hosting this event. So that's why it's our pleasure to have you here to be presenting this study. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Laura. Thank you to the AECID as well for being the hosts and for all the support in this process. I also wanted to thank Maria Jesus Conde. She's the ambassador on special missions for the feminist foreign policy. She's also with us today. Here we don't have that little sign, but I think you've seen it in the program. I talk and as the state coordinator for ADCD, and we're the ones implementing the presentation of this study with the support of the agency. So thank you very much to the people who are here and the people who are online. More or less a year ago, we presented from from La Coordinadora the proposals from the Spanish presidency of the Council of the European Union, and one of the main ideas to foster was to have an essential role from the civil society in the European Union and CELAC summit that we would have in June 2023. It had almost been 8 years since we have not had such high-level summit with that level of foreign relations as La Coordinadora. We were very active in the fostering committee so that we had a forum for civil society. We compiled different proposals, and among them, we had precisely backing up and fostering a bi-regional pact for care. Since then, we have created a group that counts on the support and the backup of the agency. It's a group of civil society from the European Union and Latin America and the Caribbean, from which we have kept on pushing and requesting to have a mechanism for an active participation of civil society in the next summit, which will be in 2025 in Colombia. And we advocated that this bi-regional pact was passed. It's one of the main actions that we carry out. As we said from last year, we gave our proposals to the state departures. There was a draft of this declaration which they included the pact, but in the end it was left out. We insisted and we persisted, and we're here presenting this study with a double goal. First of all, to contribute to the reflections on what comprehensive care systems, what care policies we want and with which approaches, because Laura was already talking about some of them. We want them to have feminist approaches. We don't want class differences or race differences to be fostered, and we want to have community and environmental sustainability approaches. The other goal is for this to be left in the declaration, in the statement. That's why, as I said, we're presenting the study today, and we keep on fostering this proposal. We think that in times such as this, which are so difficult, it's a very important reason to keep on working. It's a very important model to keep on fostering. I'm going to give the floor to Maria Jesus Condezabal. As I said, is the ambassador for a special mission for feminist foreign policy, and she'll be here with us today in the table as well. Thank you very much, Laura and Penelope. Thank you to La Coordinadora for inviting me to participate, and to the AECID for having hosted this event. We're in a roadmap that is not lacking any difficulty, besides any support that we might have in the generation of knowledge by many governments and social organizations. These analysis and spaces for reflection are necessary. The economy of care is part of the Spanish feminist foreign policy. As you know, in 2021, Spain announced that their foreign policy from that date, specifically the president of the government, the prime minister, would have a feminist approach. That means that gender equality has constitute constituted itself to be a pillar for all the functioning of the government, both for regional, national, European, and international affairs, and they identified five priorities: women, peace and security, human rights for women and children and girls, fight against gender-based violence, and economic justice. And the economic inside economic justice and women empowerment has everything that has to do with coalition for justice and rights, economic justice for rights, and a coalition for the foreign generation of equality that Spain is co-leader to. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has been the coordinator of all the commitments from the government of Spain for the foreign generation of equality, and specifically all initiatives that are related to the economy of care that have not specifically been developed in the ministry because of the AECID or because of the Spanish cooperation. They have falling into the responsibility of the political dialogue in foreign affairs. In that sense, it's important to remember that in the Forum of the Generation of Equality that we are working on to have a decent kind of work for the economy of care, for the equal access to all resources, and for the access of women to funding. We participated in May last year, the meeting that we carried out for the Ministries of Foreign Affairs for Germany, Argentina, Mexico, and Spain for the ULAD Foundation in Berlin. We participated in a bi-regional forum to try to feed on the discussions that the chiefs of state were going to be tending to in the summit of the EU CELAC in Brussels under the Spanish presidency of the Council of the European Union. Among the proposals that were made, we came up with the Bi-Regional Pact. It's a meeting in which close to 140 representatives of the government, academia, civil society, international organisms, we had UN Women and CEPAL, and we had very specific proposals to move forward with the Bi-Regional Pact. As you know, unfortunately, we could not finally adhere that to the statement of the summit, EU ALC, but we have kept on working. But before moving on with Chile, it's very important to say that in June in Spain, together with Mexico, Argentina, Chile, Germany, and some other countries that I might not recall right now, but I'd like to mention it right now because they're quite linked to the Bi-Regional Pact. We fostered in the United Nations two resolutions that are a historic benchmark on the importance on care for the development of our lives as individuals and for the development of societies. Thanks to these diplomatic efforts, the General Assembly passed unanimously the celebration of an International Day for Care, which is the 29th of October every year. In the Council for Human Rights, they passed a resolution for the acknowledgement to the right of care from a perspective of rights. It does not mean that right now it has already been incorporated the right to care as a human right, but it's a first step, and from the Office of the High Commissioner so that they can start working towards that direction. So the ambassadors for the feminist foreign policy from other countries in Europe and basically for all the countries in Latin America, we have kept on following up the Bi-Regional Pact of Care that was presented in this 65th Regional Conference on Women in Latin America that was hosted in Santiago in October last year, with the intention of strengthening cooperation mechanisms that are regional and multilateral that acknowledge the economy of care as the driver for development. Very recently, in the parallel event that happened in New York due to the 68th Commission on the Legal Statute of Women, the EU ALC, CEPAL, UN Women, governments from Mexico and Argentina, and Spain, sorry, They organized an event precisely to try to make this pact come back to life. And very important decisions were made. It's a parallel event, but I think that something that's very important is that we had the participation of the Foreign European Service, and specifically the ambassador Stella Roner, representing SAE. She's the ambassador for equality from the European Union. She emphasized that the countries from Latin America are key partners for the European Union in the agenda for care, because we have shared a historical commitment towards social equality and care and gender equality. I think it's quite a firm statement in the European Union and in Latin America. I'm going to get close to my finish because we're starting the campaign for the European Union elections. Spaces such as this are necessary to keep on building this vision of the economy of care. It's important to count on civil society and international organizations. We have to keep on working with the private sector. They should be here represented. We have to keep on working with them. And we have to strengthen the abilities from the members of the parliament. Parliaments are essential, and national, regional parliaments are important. They're essential in creating laws that are linked to the policies and the services of care. That is why it's essential to mobilize in the elections of the 9th of June for the European Parliament. We need an European Parliament and legislators that are committed with social justice, human rights, and gender equality. So I invite everyone to keep on moving, to keep on working, and it's clear that if we don't have a progressive parliament in Europe, the bi-regional pact will not be successful. So I wish you all the best in this reflection day. Thank you very much. After these encouraging and reflection words, we're going to move on to the next roundtable in which we're going to be presented with the main findings of the study. As you all know, it's a compared study with several reference countries from Latin America and Europe, and they are going to give us a general paradigm on the policies for care. Thank you very much.
Bueno, buenas tardes. Muchas gracias a quienes participáis en este evento.
Good afternoon. Thank you to everyone participating in this event, both in this room and online. Thank you to the AECID for hosting this event. And please allow me to thank everyone right now, to everyone who is caring right now for others, for me to be in this space, because it's important to have spaces such as this and for us to present studies just like the one that we're going to share this afternoon, talk about care and to talk about the right to care as the exercise of the rest of rights. And it's important to give visibility to the fact that who usually exercises this right is usually women, and that creates conditions and limitations to the rest of our rights. Just to mention one specific data from the many data that appears in these studies, according to the ILO, women in the world carry out 3/4 of the non-remunerated work in the home. So that would be about 2 billion positions of employment. In the words of UN Women, this is an unjust and disproportionately concession of our time and our opportunities. In the previous table, both Penelope and Laura Oroz and the Ambassador Conte were mentioning the forums of society, European Union, Latin America, and the Caribbean that was hosted in July, last year in Brussels. I was lucky enough to participate in the organization of that forum and being there in Brussels. And I can assure you that the Bi-Regional Pact for Care was a shared wish from the organizations of civil society from both regions, but it was also a meeting point for the rest of actors that participate in these new bi-regional relationships. As I said, unfortunately, and I joined to that feeling that was not included in the final statement from the third summit, European Union CELAC, we made clear that we were going to keep on pushing, and we are going to keep on pushing to include that in the statement in Colombia 2025. But even though it was not included, as I mentioned in the previous roundtable, it had the support from many governments, from the European Union, from Latin America, from Caribbean, from and multilateral organizations such as UN Women, from EULAC, EU, ALC, and many of the actors that were in the forum in July have participated in this study. Some of them are here with us today. And I would even dare to say that there are few advocacy actions for incidents that have as much support as this proposal for the Pact of Care has. I think it's the case because even though we still have a long way to go in the matter of gender equality, and a lot to defend on so that we don't back down. We have come from years in which we have moved forward for formal equality. Now we have to move forward on real equality. And this agenda for care and the societies of care, that can be the lever that keeps on pushing the substantial equality, real equality, for its implications in the when it comes to guaranteeing that all women can exercise our rights, all of our rights, but also for the potential that it has to contribute to a model of society that can be more just and more sustainable with life and with our planet. And it's from there, from where we are thinking about this study. I have here with me in the roundtable Ana López Castelló and Marta de la Riva. We also have Marta Pajarin García online. Three of them are researchers from the Gender Unit, from the School of Government, from the Complutense University in Madrid, and authors of the study. Marta Carballo will start the presentation, then we'll have Marta Pajarin online, and then we'll have Ana López. Thank you very much to the three of you. Whenever you want, you have the floor. Thank you.
Buenas tardes. Lo primero de todo, me gustaría agradecer a esta casa, a la
Good
AECID,
afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank the AECID for hosting this event and again showing their commitment to gender equality and putting feminist discussions in the center of the agenda. They are so necessary and they are so compulsory if we actually want to move forward to just sustainable and transformative changes. I'd like to thank La Coordinadora and its whole equipment for pushing studies such as this that help to the discussion, to the models for diverse development on the systemic crisis that we have in the future of our societies. I'd like to mention Inma, especially in the whole team. With that team, it has been an honor to have worked with over these months, also to the institutions and the people that have worked with us in this study. My last mention to acknowledge would be to thank my colleagues in the gender unit because it's always an honor and a learning experience to work with them and for them. Last thing I would like to do is to place this study from a personal approach. The personal matters can be political, and in my case, the development of this has been the same for me with my twin sister and I taking care of our father from a disease that he has. And it's a care that lasts for 24 hours. And in my own case, it's a shared need with millions of women and millions of people, almost the vast majority and the ones that have the higher load are us, it's women. So it's from here, from where I would like to start presenting this study. It has been done on the framework of the project for the Spanish presidency of the Council of the European Union, and it has been led in Spain by La Coordinadora. And its main goal is creating awareness, raising awareness, and putting the importance on the actions that have been done by the European Union to achieve the goals that were set for Agenda 2030 and its contribution to create a more equal world that is more inclusive, green, feminist. It's a compared study, as I have already said. It has been done in 6 countries, 3 in Latin America and 3 in Europe. The countries from Latin America would be Argentina, Mexico, and the Dominican Republic, and the European countries are Sweden, Germany, and Spain. The criteria, you have defined them. They are defined together by La Coordinadora. They were linked to the geographical criteria. They had a geographical difference because of the different sub-regions from different geographical latitudes, so that they had systems or policies for care, and they should either have feminist foreign policy, or they should be aligned with the advances in this kind of matter. The theoretical framework that we have with this approach is the same one that has the whole work in activism in La Coordinadora. As you know, we have feminist approaches, eco-feminist approaches, intersectional approaches, decolonialists that are linked to the coherence of policies and to the approaches that are based on human rights. Even though we can't really stop to talk about all of that because we are tight on schedule, but I wanted to say that feminist approaches to care that we have seen are diverse and heterogeneous, but there is one element that is shared, which is the need to give visibility, acknowledge, and give value to these works, taking into account gender inequalities that are linked to the Care International Agency. We have seen 3 approaches that Laura talked about, and it was care as a component in well-being, how inside the welfare systems we understand that dimension of care and the responsibility from the public institutions and private institutions in giving or providing those services. Another perspective would be the one that's linked to the economy of care that the ambassador was talking about, and incorporating care to the economic analysis. And lastly, which is where this study is located, which would be the eco-feminist perspective, which is anti-racism community that puts sustainability of life in the center, decentralizing markets and changing capital. And it wants to foster a change in the model of development that wants to put forward the need of the protection of human rights and taking care of the rights of human beings as the basis for the community system. In the research we have taken into account, we have analyzed specifically everything that it has to do with coherence. And I wanted to talk specifically to transnational dimension because the study puts a special focus on the existing relationship between migrations, work, and social reproduction. And from that racist and colonial logic, we also think that it's quite new because it does an analysis on the link on the transition to care societies and that demographical transition and the big transitions that we have right now on the table, which is green transition and digital transition, but all these transformations and the changes of matrix and production. And lastly, I'd like to point out weaknesses that have been ping-pong match with La Coordinadora, but we could reach everything if the study recognizes and somehow the connection with such important matters as the sexual and reproductive rights and violence, but they have not been an object for analysis. The study, so that you can have a general overview. I need 2 minutes, sorry, not just one. The study is made up of other theoretical analysis that is lined up with the principles that La Coordinadora is using, a conceptual framework and analysis and methodology that is regional and by country. And it finishes with some conclusions and recommendations, with some sheets with a lot of information that we hope the people that have seen the study are useful to, and we want you to review it. In that conceptual framework, we have assessed that understanding of the right to care as a human right on the basis of equality, universality, and co-responsibility in social and gender matters. The right to care as something that is essential to achieve equality and independence and autonomy of women highlighting that relationship and that interdependence with other rights. We have that triple dimension, the dimension of being taken care of, exercising our self-care, and being able to take care of others. Something else that I have also talked with the Ambassador Conde is how let's hope this is contemplated as a human right, but at least it's permeating on the international framework for human rights and the declarations and recommendations, both for national, international, and regional frameworks. The definitions of care, well, I'm not going to stop there, but it's the definitions that have been agreed to in the international, regional, and national fields. And to be able to analyze the different case study for different countries, we have defined a series of variables that are the context, the evolution, and the acceleration factors, the normativity in the policies and the services, governance, budget and funding, and social transformations that promote change. In order to assess the transformative approach of each model in each country in terms of social justice, gender justice, and racial justice, we have defined a series of criteria that have been a consensus by the experts, and they have been assessed depending on the bibliographical analysis and literature that we have done. And it's for the progressivity and universality, co-responsibility for gender and social matters, and the intersectionality matters. How have we done all this? It has been a normal research that is through the analysis of different bibliographical sources and the development or carry out of different interviews, questionnaires, and a regional analysis and from the country. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marta. Online, we have Marta Pajarin. I don't know if we can hear her.
Hola, Marta, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? It's a pleasure to be here today with you.
Seguimos adelante. Bueno, comentaros que el análisis se ha realizado desde una doble aproximación, la regional y la nacional,
regional and national approximations, including a lot of information that's descriptive and quantitative about security. It's very particularly and with the course that we annexed, we would like you to look at it. But other than this analysis, the conclusions try to show trends, differential and replicas. The first conclusion is heterogeneity. We show a lot of heterogeneity. The condition analysis present very heterogeneous models, like generalized crisis, that's amplified by the acceleration and the people getting older, and the consolidation of an individualized model of daily life. In the European region, the development of care-related policies is strictly linked to the development of its welfare states. To a greater or a lesser degree, the countries studied have developed a broad, albeit fragmented response, which in a summative sense could advance towards the comprehensiveness that underlies the logic of the systemic care proposal. However, the whole is more than the sum of its parts, and this extensive previous experience hinders more structural approaches and debates such as those that are taking place in Latin America and the Caribbean, a new form of social organization, and on a change in the development model from a structural point of view. Latin America and the Caribbean, for its part, this drive towards more systemic logic is becoming an opportunity for the development of its social protection systems from a more feminine perspective of social co-responsibility and of placing the care of people and life at the center of political action. It should be noted that in Europe, welfare states have been built on the basis of the colonial heritage. And in the present context of care crisis, the colonial and racist logic articulates social responses to care needs through the exploitation of migrants and racialized people in the face of the failure of public models of universal coverage. It is estimated, for example, that more than 50% of paid domestic work in Europe is performed by migrants, mostly women, in Spain being one of the countries with a greater weight of equality. But this you can also see in Latin America and the Caribbean, where interregional migration has increased considerably, And where in the main destination countries such as Argentina and Chile, migrant women already outnumber men with a clear orientation towards care work. This is also the case with migration from rural areas and of racialized women to the main cities. The second conclusion is the link between regional visions of care policies and the various developmental proposals. As mentioned above, the study is based on the thesis that the recognition, visibility, and valuation of care work respond to the critical review of the feminist perspective on the hegemonic development model, and that under an ecofeminist paradigm of sustainability of life, the transition towards care societies must be the axis that guides profound changes in the current development model. However, in the country study, we find different narratives and with different transforming scope. What we do find are common elements like the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, highlighted in Europe and Latin America, not just the shortcomings of the model, but also the gender, class, and racial inequalities in caregiving. The regional policies, the bi-regional pact of care, the European care strategy, and the Buenos Aires commitment all agree in recognizing the disproportionate role of women in care and the associated gender inequalities, and in emphasizing the importance of social co-responsibility for care. We can also see as well the importance of care economy as an essential model for social insertion, for creating work and economic activation. But this vision tends to responses that face on commoditization of services and on the productivity of the system, to the detriment of approaches that place reproduction of life at the center and promote structural changes in social and economic organization. Another important weakness shared in both regions is the lack of integration of the decolonial approach and an adequate approach to the reality of migration, both in their diagnosis and planning. We have seen some regional divergences as well. While in the EU, there's a commitment to more digitalized and technological solutions, public-private financing, or the exploration of proposals from a disinstitutionalization approach. But in Latin America, there is more weight given to the community dimension. The role of the state is emphasized, and there is a commitment to the development of public policies in the provision of care. As a third conclusion, we place care at the crossroads of the green and digital transitions. We are in an area of transition where public agendas are facing the so-called ecological transition and digital transition parallel to the momentum of the transition to care societies. And we say parallel because coordination and dialogue between agendas and the care agenda is still weak and poorly articulated, since in state and regional debates, we observe an isolated vision of the green and digital transitions and little anchored to postulates of the paradigm of sustainability of life. However, from the perspective of just a feminist transition, the care economy can be a strategic sector with a significant impact on the generation of fair and decent jobs, sustainability, and social transformation. Thus, for example, given the current digital gender gap, the lack of integration of the gender perspective in the digital agenda accentuates the risk of widening inequalities and discrimination in the access, use, and benefit of digital technology. This very weak link that we can see in the European care strategy places emphasis on the issues oriented towards digitalization and less towards essential aspects of care, like collectivization, redistribution of work, of job, or the emphasis on the affective dimension that runs through them. So in short, we understand that the transition towards care societies has to be the axis of inspiration and articulation for the rest of the transitions proposed in the current agenda. Thank you. Thank you very much, Marta. We're gonna pass the mic to Ana. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry, I was verifying the slides. Yeah, so the fourth block of conclusions of the study focuses in, as you can see, that if there's no policy coherence, we cannot avoid systemically the care. So the politics linked to care have been launched in a sectoralized way through work, education, and health. And all the studies show the difficulty to articulate an articulated and coordinated vision. The actors and institutions, and also at an administrative level. But a bigger vision also transcends these areas, and it has to have economic and fiscal politics, environment. I'm sorry. It needs other areas like fiscal, economic structures, environment, foreign and migratory policy. In the intersection between the regimes of care and migration, there's the context where we have all this work of care. In none of the cases that we studied, we saw the care for migration policies, and this is not something that we see in the regional areas analyzed. When we analyze the foreign feminist politics, we see a limited integration of the perspective of care with initiatives, well, that are in a way isolated in some cases. And in others, for example, in Argentina, when the new administration came in, a proposal that's more structured to launch from the feminist foreign politics. So the feminist exterior politics shows an opportunity to turn into an integral solution aligned with the commitment of equality in the international and regional frameworks that gives value to the sustainability of life, because we cannot forget the environmental area and the links of care with the climate change. Care society needs to see these dimensions and overcome these anthropocentric visions of development. In sixth place or in fifth place, we have aspects related to three elements that are essential for the capacity of to respond to the politics. First, a lack of laws, so there's the financing that the governments face or show a very complicated scenario. Something that's transforming it's not possible if there's no more public funds, or if the investment is not included in the budgets. What we have studied, we don't see economics changing or a commitment to financing in the long term. A systemic vision of care requires mechanisms that are new, public budgets like labeling care, or also designing new mechanisms for budgets focused on gender. An example of this would be the proposal of law that wanted to create an infrastructure for care to destine at least 8.5% of the annual budget to care infrastructure. On top of that, the advancement of this politics has been essential for multilateral institutions. A lot of the countries that have legislations or focus on care have the support and the financing of entities like Mujeres, OIT, CEPAL, Eurosocial Program, or in the of funds from the European Union. This generates questions for the continuity and sustainability of initiatives if the funds are not there any longer. So we have to adjust and reorient the fiscality of states, see financing, and combine public and private funds without compromising the principles of universality and progressiveness. The ability of commitment for the political forces puts into risk the sustainability of the proposal, especially in the cases where financing has not been approved and the systems are in incipient states like Argentina and Mexico. The presentation is not in order, I'm sorry. There's another block of conclusions that talks about national experiences to highlight. I'm sorry, I'm doing in out of order. So the proposal generated show wider visions and transforming in the countries where feminist movements are can interact with governments more. And we have seen this in Argentina and Mexico. In Spain, the organization of migrant women in the sector of care has been essential for the recognition of the rights of a collective that's essential in covering care needs in all countries. Another element to highlight of the new proposals is recognizing specifically the right to care, as we have said. In the case of Mexico, for example, it's there's legislation and the Constitution of the City of Mexico in this case. But it's not like that in the European Union. We will have the integration in the normative frameworks. In Europe, we find an institutionalization that's solid, decentralized, sectoralized, and with a lack of coordination between sectors that compromises the universality of some of the measures. In the Latin America and the Caribbean, we see these weaknesses, and there's a fragile infrastructure. These new proposals are trying to overcome these weaknesses, creating mechanisms for governing intersectionally, especially under the leadership of the mechanisms like the interministerial table for care in Argentina, the intersectional table for care in the Dominican Republic and in Mexico. Some of these experiences also have measures for the cultural change. And again, the cases of Argentina and Mexico. And in general, in Mexico, the new law is conceptualized as a tool to fight gender violence. And they're heterogeneous, and they try to focus in models of a custom attention that are more flexible for communities. And in Europe, we can see that in Switzerland, and especially with the in Sweden, I'm sorry, they do this from this perspective. With this system of political care, we need to generate information with questionnaires specific to care, registering care workers, creating common criteria of certification and quality. And in that sense, in the European case, France is doing this very well in the care area. The study also has recommendations that show advancement lines for more fair and sustainable solutions, like having international standards for the right of care, political coherence for the systemic approach, or relevance of promoting dialogue frameworks between Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Thank you, Ana. Thank you to the three of you. As Marta was saying, in the Coordinadora, we have 4 axes. We focus on the human rights, policy coherence for a sustainable development, intersectional and decolonization. As you have explained, these axes are in the basis of the study. And with this study, we want to contribute, as Penelope was saying, to the debate of care from a wide and systemic vision that takes into account cultural and effective aspects of care. The community vision that we are interdependent and codependent, that care of, in a way or other, are present through our lives. And of course, that all intersectionalities that go through them, mainly gender, origin, and social class. With the way to the round table for this project of Spanish presidency for the regional care pact between Latin America and the Caribbean.
Muchísimas gracias. En principio,
thank you very much, Ana Alonso, to La Coordinadora, for being in the debate last year in Brussels. And of course, we are going to invite to this table for this regional pact for care in the European region, Latin America, and the Caribbean to Cecilia Güemes, Director of AECID's Gender Affairs Divisions in the Autonomous University of Madrid, Natalia Walla, Technical Director of International Relations, and now she's a candidate to the United Nations for the rights for people with disabilities for the period 25-28 for Uruguay. Online, we have Tania Sanchez, Executive Director, Coordinadora de la Mujer, and a member of Trenzado Cuidados Network. Also on a video, we have Lady Bahin, President of the EU LAC Foundation. And through a changing agenda, she will not be able to be participating online, but we have a video. And then we have Raquel Coelho, Regional Specialist in Economic Empowerment Policies at the UN Women LAC.
Bueno, en principio esto, ¿no? Que los cuidados en el centro es una visión esencial, pero que además tiene como
this is essential, but we saw in the report these visions that the center is not an average, but there's inequality between women, inequality between racialized women, inequality with migrants, inequality north and south, and that we have to keep in mind, as we also said, even in the feminist movement in the incidents it can have as a social transcendental movement. And as they were mentioning, the researchers, the need to have feminist movements that can have the government or legislators in the movement, or the people from the embassies. It is where we see the difference between what we could see in a government management, with the example of Argentina, and something that has changed so much in so little time, in that we saw lately the level of change, and we have to think about having care, and also to start, we are going to see the Lady Bahin's video.
Buenas tardes, amigas y compañeras. Un saludo.
Good afternoon, friends and colleagues. A very fraternal greeting to all of you. This year, we have been building a great alliance between different actors, an alliance between international organizations such as UN Women, AECID, governments of the Latin American and Caribbean region, such as Mexico, the Alliance for Care, as well as European institutions and governments, such as the government of Spain or gender studies institutions in Brussels, and of course, the EU LAC Foundation and different civil society associations. The objective has been to place the bi-regional agenda to need to generate a great path, a bi-regional path for care, and we have been setting this objective step by step, framing it in different meetings and events that we have been holding prior to the summit held in Brussels. The latest milestone was precisely a meeting on ESW in which different ministers from LAC and European governments, together with actors from civil society and international organizations, took a step forward and said that we want to build concrete proposals in the agenda for the next summit in Colombia. In other words, so far we have put the what on the agenda, and now we have to go deeper into the how. At the event in New York, we were able to identify some challenges. Some of them have to do with going a little deeper into the models we're talking about, into the concepts we're talking about. It's important to emphasize, for example, in the European Union, public policies on the welfare state that are aimed at the care society and systems that guarantee equality. And the same is true in Latin America, where it is also necessary to emphasize that community care entails, to know how to go deeper into it, and to take into account the cultural, economic, and social context of both regions. Building a narrative that is capable of understanding this context is very important in order to move forward together in this bi-regional path. The second challenge has to do with also deepening the models and understanding the need for intersectional governments and how to connect some debates that are fundamental, putting caregivers and those who are cared for at the center, and to connect some essential areas such as, for example, care and migration, in short, an intersectional view. Finally, it is also very important that we address funding, and that is why it is important that in the upcoming meetings in Mexico with AECID is leading, and also in the European Union, we find financing and cooperation instruments to be able to cover the cost of this commitment. In short, we need is to continue to deepen our understanding of what model we want, of those public policies that guarantee rights and equality, and how we are going to finance them. The next few months are going to be crucial in the EU, and of course, it's going to be very important that what Parliament exists, what orientation that Parliament has, and what government emerges from that Parliament. It is extremely important that we continue to push for equal rights, because we are well aware that building a society that takes into account equality in the care system means continuing to strengthen the foundations of equality between men and women, to turn the European Union into a that to avoid taking steps backwards, to continue guaranteeing women's freedom, to address the issues as important as the use of time, the reduction of the working day, the continuation of women's working and personal lives, and of course, sexual and reproductive rights. That is why it's important that we continue to move forward and that we do not allow a single step backwards. In this task, we will continue to work together, and I invite you to continue to deepen, to continue working, exchanging, and betting on this common path in which we all believe. So we heard Lady Pajín, and we also asked Elisa Jauregui that from these conclusions in this report, she's talking about the conclusions about care, and especially about the bi-regional care pact. Thank you. First, thank you for being here with us in the presentation of this report. In the other table, my colleagues talked about the research, and they explained exhaustively the comparative analysis in the model of care that we are doing in both regions. In this report, there's also a series of recommendations. There's a different recommendations, but now from the coordinadora, we are gonna talk about 5, also because of time. So we have condensed 5 recommendations for 5 minutes, and we also want to highlight again that these recommendations also have this coherence that has been talked about in the prior table, that are influenced by perspectives of La Coordinadora that have to do with perspectives of feminist, eco-feminist, intersectional, and decolonizing. The first recommendation from La Coordinadora, we think that we have to advance in this transforming society. This implies having conceptions that are total for about care. We have to think about and how we think this paradigm of care that has to go hand in hand with the sustainability of life. In this sense, these integral systems of care need to have coherence as well with the development policy of the sustainable development that has to go hand in hand with this public politics, for example, health, education, but also it's key the migration politics and job politics that have to be seen. They have to go with this male violence, and it have to do with reproduction rights as well. Second recommendation, we think that we need to advance in the recognizing the right to care in the normative frameworks as well, not just nationally but also internationally. We want to see how we're gonna see this effort of these mechanisms of coordination, as we were saying, intersectionally, interterritorially, multi-actor in the social civil society. That's key. The idea of creating this pact of care as a civil society, it has a key role in Spain, we saw that during the pandemic, the key role that these organizations had, and also when we talk about this framework of migration, putting the center the need for care. And along the same lines, since we are talking about this acknowledgement, we want to talk about the work done in these organizations that has these standards, international standards about care from the systemic perspective, and that's what we are putting in the center. It has to have this structural vision. As a third recommendation, we are also commenting the fair transitions. We are thinking of, when we think about these transitions of the society of care, we think that it is key, motivational and inspirational. It has to also have a purpose and articulate other transitions that are going on right now, and that have to do with this green digital transition. Fourthly, we think it's fundamental to guarantee public funding, that's enough public funding. We don't, not just the design of public policies and implementation. If it doesn't have a financing, it's not going to be effective, and we know that we cannot just implement without this fundamental area, which is funding. And finally, the fifth recommendation, we think that we have to promote the generation of knowledge on care. It's acknowledgement and rethink collectively what we understand as care, and how we put it in this welfare state, and go deeper in how we think about this welfare state, who is in, who is out, and also when we talk about women, migrant women. And when we talk during the pandemic, they were the ones that sustained this care to establish and follow this welfare state. They were excluded then. So this should foster reflection state. And after all this thinking and reflection that I'm talking about, to talk about this model of care, it has to be linked to with other questions as important, like power relationships and social class and race. As I said earlier, of course, there's a divide, a sexual divide in work, but there's also a racial divide at work, and that's key to have that in mind. More than 50% of women that work are migrant women, the ones that work in this sector. But this is even heightened if we keep in mind that most of them that have been analyzed, and they're racialized, and they're outside because they have irregular administrative situations. And on the other side, that we were also talking, these other recommendations about the bi-regional pact, I think that it's very important from La Coordinadora. It's essential to continue the dialogue and go deeper in this dialogue, but also the way in which we keep creating these connections to finally put at the center of the social politics this need for this care pact, but also keeping in mind institutions, but also, of course, feminist organizations, women organizations, migrant women, and racialized women, to have, as I was saying, a common feminist agenda where we can share the mechanisms, new mechanisms of technical cooperation and financial cooperation. And I think that's it, right? Okay, so we're gonna keep going, and now the ball goes to Cecilia Güemes with this area that's very on trend right now. She's done some research in Argentina. So what are the goals? What have they achieved but they had some achievement in when there was dialogue between government and institutions. But what happens with this change of management? What are the risks? And also to have this as an example, why is it important to have this bi-regional pact so care is not in risk? They don't go backwards if there's a management that doesn't have foreign feminist politics.
Muchas gracias también a las dueñas de casa por plantear esta actividad y por
Thank you,
promover
and thank you to all the care women, to the authors of the study, and all the colleagues that are making this an issue. And so now that we have all this mutual respect, I'm going to talk about Argentina, as you were saying, but I'm going to use an example as well, because we should not talk about specific examples because these are dangerous. We were talking about Brazil, now we're talking about Argentina, and who knows how many we're going to have to talk about. But there's a couple of risks that all care policies have, and everything that's related to gender equality. So first, the use of terminology. There's a big problem with communication, especially with the far right. They're using the word feminism. They're using this word, appropriating them. They are not feminists at all, but it's not just with feminism, but also with the care as a tool. And they romanticize this care to make conservative and traditional politics. It's this movement of the trad wives that we had in the UK, but also with the pandemic. We also saw this in Peru. We saw this in Brazil, in Poland, in different spaces. So careful, because care is also at risk. They can be turned into tools as a concept and its content. So that would be the first big issue. And this is very concerning in countries and societies with wellness states that are not consolidated. We have the states that are fragile, that depend on governments. I'm not going to start talking about this, but they are centered on the family. In going back to the concept of family, what does it mean? It's a very nuclear term, very moral, very religious, with very close features, where we can only talk about blood, right? There's not a cultural debate about family and what it implies. We have a family that we choose. You were talking about ecofeminism. We talked about this several times, but the risk of the challenge of this is that if we only talk about people, if we go back to the wellness states that dominate in the America and Latin America, it's just the parents, brothers, cousins. It's not the community, it's not neighbors, it's not the other. It's just like a sympathy circle that's very, very tight and closed. The other big issue is that care, it can be turned into a tool as a term, but we also idealize it, and then we omit the conflict around care. And this is something that we don't really like to talk about, because when there's a conflict, we avoid it, we allude to it, we just hope for it to disappear. So idealizing, it's romanticized, it means sacrifice. And we talked about sharing care, but we also have to see the conflict and look for ways to resolve conflicts in a generative way, not under dominance, with terms that define it. Now, when we talk about care, they have to pay or not pay care workers. I mean, other than that, when there's a conflict, how do we solve this conflict? And we have to involve ourselves and talk about conflicts. And of course, you probably say we have to keep in mind government and how collectively we solve conflicts around care, how we can be together with everything we are talking about. The second risk, other than turning it into a tool, is something that we have talked about. It's de-financing of care. Without resources, we cannot do more. We cannot do more with less. This is a lie, and it keeps repeating, and it's not even acknowledged anymore. So we cannot do more with less, and without economic and human resources, we cannot care for anybody. So we see this in Brazil, in the first person. If you don't have financing, you have to eliminate institutions. You can keep it aesthetically, but if there's not resources, there's no public politics, there's no social help. And these are the ones that land and turn this social right into a reality. So it doesn't make any sense to have norms and the right to care or acknowledge it symbolically if there's no funds that are specific that we can be executed with aid. I think this is another issue. And talking about the bi-regional pact, this is just another way of pressuring so that we put this on the table, same way that the Agenda 2030 was one. Some government, as we can see, and it's evident, they can skip it. They can skip the 2030 agenda, the bi-regional pact, or international rights, anything. So why have a pact so that we can have another tool to pressure and an excuse to talk and do something? But it's in our hands to be solid and to recover the parliament, something that looks that's out of fashion, like parliament or voting. If we do not vote, if we do not choose, we can't do anything. So we need these pacts so that they have a specific content to bring these tools back. Super interesting, Cecilia, about because we know that care is the risk of being turned into a tool or ignored. And Natalia, we have a central question. I mean, in Uruguay, we need a central space for care, even people with disabilities. What does this pact have to include when there's people with disabilities? Something that we see a lot with licenses and after retiring, pensions, mothers, fathers, and people with disabilities. Thank you. And thank you, Luciana. Thank you to La Coordinadora for the invitation and for having us in their home. And also thank this study that compiles the perspective of people with disabilities. And I think that this is great, as Luciana was saying. What do we have to think about in terms of disability when we think about a bi-regional pact? We have to keep in mind the social paradigm of disability. What is it? As considering people with disabilities as people that have rights. This looks evident, but it's not like that. It's not like that. I mean, when we heard Cecilia, she was saying that in the case of disabilities, in some contexts, they're also the first ones to be used as tools. So a bi-regional pact of care needs to have perspectives for this social paradigm of disability, and it translates in seeing people with disabilities in every dimension of care. This means, for example, in this study, we see that most of the experiences, and the study confirms that people with disabilities, we appear as people that we receive care. They appear in systems, in policies, in both sides of the Atlantic, and they focus especially in systems of care during infancy for kids with disabilities. They focus on older people, 40% of people older than 65, because they've lived longer and life expectancy, they acquire disabilities, and then people in a situation of dependency. We are not all dependent, but all the people in a situation of dependency have disability. So of course, we are present in that area. However, and hence the having this transversal view of the social paradigm of disability, we also offer care. we take care of others, specifically girls and women with disabilities. There's a double discrimination. On the one hand, because they can work, they're not in the labor market, because we are not productive, we have no value, because we're women and because we're women with a disability. And also we are not seen in the care area for the same reason, because we have no value, and the care usually fall on women and girls with disabilities. And the third area I would like to talk about is self-care and the need to incorporate visibility. The people with disabilities, we also have the right of self-care and the right to receive training and information so that we can take care consequently, so that we can exercise consent when we make decisions, for example, related to self-care, and also being autonomous. And this is part of the goals of care. And in that sense, we need to have to incorporate this perspective in a bi-regional type, this paradigm that puts us, that makes us visible, people with disabilities, and especially women and girls with disabilities in all the areas of care, and also focusing on the care in all dimensions, quality, training, information, so that this care goes through all people with disabilities throughout their life, and people that offer or give care also have the training, so that this care is a quality care in any person, but especially in the case with people with disabilities. So maybe in a following study, we can show the situations that cross care in situations of violence, of abuse, and maybe because they come from no protection happen in these areas of disability. Natalia, your vision opening ways to keep researching, to keep thinking from self-care and a collective self-care. Now the idea would be connecting with Tania. She is in Bolivia, and there's a central access in most of the people that work, for example, in the Arabic countries, 80%, North America, 71%, and in Europe, 55% are migrants. So the question for Tania is, what happens with these migrant people? Also thinking about the internal migration in Latin America, and then going from Latin America to Europe. Can you hear us, Tania? Yeah, good evening to everybody. And thank you for the invitation, Raula Coordinadora, and everything related to compiling experiences and views. And I think that this that you were asking, Luciana, in Latin America and in Europe, I think, and you said this in the investigation, migration is a phenomenon that's complex. It has a lot of social implications, and economic and cultural, and it has a variety of factors that go from looking more a better economic opportunity or running away from conflict in the countries where they're coming from, and that this migration can be voluntary and forced. And definitely, as you were saying, it affects people individually, but also affects communities. And I think that part of that, what we were mentioning, is that immigration is not just a movement of people, but it has a significant impact in the care of our societies. And as you were saying, these are especially migrant women, the ones that are assuming tasks of care the ones that face jobs as carers or in caring spaces. So we think, as you were talking about this, but in the migratory processes and in care, we reinforce collective values and we strengthen the cultural richness. This is something that you cannot see, but it's still invisible. But and that's where we can recover good practices. But it is talk about care in decolonizing and feminism vision. This would be linked to patriarchy, racism, and colonizing. So in this process, we need to talk about, and something that's from the feminist movement and from the civil society from a long time. We have been launching this since the economic and COVID crisis that the world is suffering. Now on its position, as you see, acknowledging the right to care, to be cared for, and self-care. And this has not been compiled in public or internal politics. So we think that's important to find new ways around looking how we sustain and recognize these rights, but also acknowledging and recognizing this fundamental component that's the personal, the work of care, paid or not paid, has to put life in the center and the sustainability of life. And talking now about societies of care, and as you were saying, recognizing the right to care, be cared for, we need to also answer to challenges, as I was saying, from the feminist economy and the civil society we have been building for a long time. And this implies rethinking the economical models that mercantilize life, and think about economic, political, and social models that put a focus on people and on sustainability of life. And also talking again, the view we have from Latin America, when we talk about care, when we talk about sustaining life, it's not just a relationship between people and the collective, but something that our collective is doing of the environment. And that's something that we are focusing on as well. So we believe that talking about a bi-regional pact of care first has to promote cooperation in public politics and integral systems of care that transform and guarantee the sustainability of life, mainly incorporating this vision of environment and promoting a culture of care based in equity and social justice, and also of gender and race, as a response to challenges shared in all regions in Latin America and also in Europe. And in here, a note, the vision of development that also has to include questioning our fiscal resources and also the redistribution of the resources. And there's the importance that when we talk, and we have been talking and sustaining this from the Latin American social society, we have been organizing for this in these spaces. The need to launch this bi-regional pact of care makes that we don't, it is not just a tool, but it's mainly it can be specific, strengthen or generate a practice publicly, but also of this public policies that help strengthen and transform our societies that are still patriarchal, capitalists
Tania,
and
muchísimas gracias.
colonizers.
Tania
Thank
Sánchez
you very
es
much,
directora
Tanya.
ejecutiva de
Tanya Sanchez
Coordinadora de
is
Mujeres
the
y miembro de la Red
executive director of the
Transando
Trenzando network.
Cecilia decía que
And
sin
great
presupuestos no hay
words,
cuidado,
Cecilia is saying that
sin
without
impuestos o
budget, there's no
políticas
care,
fiscales no se pueden
without taxes
sostener
or
también una
policies,
economía
they
de los
cannot be
cuidados y que su
sustained.
economía
But
también
an
cuestiona
economy of
el
care
modelo
also
económico
questions
neoliberal
an
y propone un modelo
economical
económico
neoliberal
sostenible.
model
Vamos
and
a
also
pasar a hablar con
proposes a
Raquel
sustainable model.
Coelho,
Now
también
we're
de
going to
modo
talk
online.
with
Y
Raquel Coelho
Raquel, te quería preguntar
online.
cuál es el
And
impacto
Raquel,
del
I wanted
gobierno
to
en materia
ask you, what
económica en
is the
relación al
impact of
Producto
economically
Interno
related
Bruto
with
y
the
también cómo podemos
PIB,
garantizar
and
que
also how
existan
we
los
can
recursos
guarantee
económicos
that there's
necesarios
economical
para implementar
resources needed to implement
públicas de
public
cuidados en
politics
países de
for care
América
in
Latina y el
countries of
Caribe
Latin America
y
and the
estén
Caribbean,
garantizados ya no solo por
and
las
guarantee
distintas
not
gestiones,
just the
sino
different
también por
management,
una realidad
but
que
also
genera
a
una enorme
reality that
desigualdad entre
generates
regiones y que
inequality
es
between
cuando
regions.
existen
And that's
deudas
when
externas que
there's
condicionan
external
los
debt that
presupuestos
condition the
públicos de
public
estos
budgets
países.
for these countries.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias.
Well,
Primero,
thank you very
agradecer
much.
la invitación,
Thank you for the invitation, for being here in this space and for organizing this. And also congratulate the study. I think it's very relevant, and I really liked to listen to the presentation. Well, first you were asking about the impact in the economy related to the net product, but the care is the central element that allows social reproduction, but also the labor force. Without care, in some of the interventions said, none of us could be here or could go to work, etc. So now there's different assessments that measurement the contribution when we talk about non-paid job, and that's from 9 to 27%. So around 20% of the gross domestic product is a contribution. It would be the equivalent, equals 20% of the gross domestic product. We also have to start looking beyond the gross domestic product. It used to be in the UN agenda. We have to look further to have other views of what it needs, because the gross domestic product, it cannot include all these elements like the contribution of the non-paid care. Also saying that the care is central when we can go beyond this not paid care and we go to paid care. We have to be able to widen the public demand. It has to be fundamental. Part of this contribution goes to a generation of work. The OIT calculates that for 2030 we could have more than hundreds of thousands of jobs when we cover this deficit of care in health and education and in attention that need this care. What's small, somebody was asking about, sometimes we don't even ask ourselves where are we investing and in this debt, but we think that debt of the countries are in debt for bigger investments in infrastructure, when it is proven that investments in care can generate 3 times more jobs than in public investment. So it's not just a need, it's smart to use debt of the public resources, not just of a debt, that contributes more to the population welfare, but also wellness, I'm sorry, but it has social revenue and also economical. We have studied in this in several countries, and when we invest in care, you generate jobs, but you also generate revenue in taxes and in social security. Well, we shouldn't be generating more debt. So part of this investment can be contributes to strengthening the fiscal space. And the other point I wanted to highlight in the intervention, and this is something that we have been talked about in all the intervention, is the need to look and widen the view of the fiscal space. A lot of countries say that we cannot invest because we don't have resources. With the CEPAL, when we did a summit in Buenos Aires, and when we talked about the Buenos Aires commitment, there was a study about possible views on financing systems and politics of care, and we saw that there's options. The first option is we're reducing the tributation that exists in the region. For example, we can calculate that up to 6.1% of the gross domestic product is lost because there's evasion of taxes. There's another area that's revise and reduce tributary costs. So when you don't get as many because of benefit or because of fiscal exemptions that sometimes are for specific groups, the groups that were able to negotiate better fiscal benefits. If we think about these benefits and we reduce them, or we focus them for elements that really contribute to development, there's also an impact, a positive impact in the improvement of revenue of countries. CPAL says that we can get more than 4% in this kind of investment. And then also looking for more revenue. As we said, in the European Union, we have this green transition, this digital transition. There's new spaces for revenue, there's benefits that are not paying, and then also want to improve the progressivity of taxes. Latin America is very, there's a lot of inequality, but tributary pressure is not as big, and it's also leaning towards regressive taxes. So we have to improve progressivity and also the capacity to be able to, of this collection, to be able to invest in spaces, in needs, and in agenda that's as powerful as the care agenda. Well, we want to write everything down to be able to repeat this and have it as a calculator, but also for bringing this to this crossroads and seeing how
we wanted to think about how we can
report
think about
can
this
show
report in the daily
when we talk
conversations when we talk
about,
about protests
demonstrations
for
in Madrid and in other
healthcare or
areas. We're also
public
talking
healthcare
about
in other cities.
care
We're thinking
and
about people who
people
do
that
care activities in that
are
sense. They
paid
are
for, and also
remunerated,
the
they're paid
impact on the
activities. And
economy.
what's the
We're
impact
gonna
in
go
economy?
now to
We're going to move on with Ana Wedmes. We want to ask her how a policy based on care can be an alternative to think about
for a
a
model
development model
of
that is
development
based in the
centered in
sustainability of life
sustainability
and the planet.
Muchas gracias, Luciana. Y bueno, todo eso en 5 minutos, pero creo que tú has dicho algo muy importante. Los
I think you have
cuidados
said
están en
something
primer
that's very
lugar,
important.
están en la
Care is in the public
conversación y
agenda,
está
they are in the
además
conversation,
siendo, una necesidad creciente que recae hasta ahora sobre todo en
and
los
they are an
hogares
increasing
y en las mujeres.
need,
Quiero
specifically that
extender los
it's a
saludos
responsibility
a la
that falls in women. I want to say hi to the La Coordinadora, the team that has developed this report, and they have presented it with such emotion and all that, to the networks of Latin America, the Caribbean, and Europe. There's always a network of organization to AECID, the Spanish Cancellery, and acknowledging the importance that Spain has in the presidency and pushing this topic in the European Union, but also in the multilateral framework. There have been several advances since we met in Berlin last year to start talking about this idea. So we recognize that this study thinks about something that's essential, which is the idea of doing an essential change in the model for development. We don't even talk about a cascade crisis, we talk about a crisis in development. And the solution, or one of the solutions, is without a doubt this idea of placing the care of people and the planet in the center, this idea of life sustainability. All this is an imperative, as we have already talked about. It's ethical, it's economical, and it has the potential not only to give an answer to a crisis of care, but it also has a huge potential of breaking that vicious circle that there is between poverty and exclusion and inequality in the regions. So we can make economies more dynamic, as Raquel Cuello has just explained, through this growing sector. And indeed, we can create high quality employment that's linked to care. It's a crucial strategy to achieve gender equality, and we're going to talk about this in the ILO convention. This is going to be a very important thing, but it also helps to the well-being of society and economic growth. We are talking beyond the GDP as a value, putting time in the center for Latin America and the Caribbean. We have calculated that 21% of the current GDP, that is non-remunerated work. So almost 75% of this work is made by women. This is unsustainable, and I think the first thing that we have to say is that the situation is not sustainable anymore. It is not sustainable now, but it will be even less sustainable in the future. I'd like to emphasize that Latin America and the Caribbean get to this pact with such a specific situation, which is that we have a regional conference on women in Latin America and the Caribbean. We have been meeting for the last 47 years. It's a subsidiary body by the PAL, and since 2020, we have organized this with the coordination of UN Women, in which we have the participation and discussions and deliberation with United Nations as well, sorry. But as a conclusion, we have kept on moving forward. It's a region that has a progressive and comprehensive agenda, specifically the Buenos Aires commitment that starts this conversation together with the European Strategy for Care. The Buenos Aires commitment recognizes care as a right for people to be taken care of, to care, and to exercise self-care, including measures that are very clear to overcome the sexual division of labor. And it wants to move towards a fair social organization of care within the framework of a new style of development that promotes gender equality in the economic, social, and environmental dimensions. And besides the approaches that you have talked about, like feminism, decolonization, commitment, I think it's also important to think about the help of indigenous peoples, because the idea of this comes from the idea of living well, and it's not only in codependency related to interdependency, but also equality with regards to sustainability. We cannot think of a future with sustainable development if we don't move forward with equality. This is a topic that was much present in the presidency of the Spanish presidency of Spain in the European Union, in the Council of the European Union. So this has implications for economic pacts, which are going to be long-term, and the idea of how we think of care in all public policies, educational policies, healthcare, social protection, but also, as you have talked about, also in macroeconomic and fiscal policies. I can deepen into that information later if you'd like me to, but I'd like to tell you that we're moving towards the new conference that's going to happen in Mexico 2025. The different female ministers and high authorities have approved this matter, and it's going to be about the transformations in the political, economical, social, cultural, and environmental spheres to promote the care society and gender equality. So we want a big push forward, we want a big move, and we want to solve very clear topics through the systems for funding, for the resources of times to care. I think we should be talking about the time to care, because we can't solve everything in the market. We need to change the structure of our work participation as well in our current times, which are also quite exhausted for life. And I'd like to close by saying that we're thinking about this idea of acknowledging care. That's how we took it to Buenos Aires. That's how governments passed it as a right, as an essential employment, and therefore it has to be decent. And it's a sector that has the potential of revitalizing economies. I would like to say that beyond the pact that we're going to be talking about in the second question as well, Spain is going to be the headquarters for the 4th International Conference on the Funding for Development that will be happening the beginning of July 2025. Mexico will be the headquarters of the regional consultation, and I think it's an excellent moment to propose care, and with the support of La Coordinadora and this collective push that we're having to promote this idea of inclusive states that are participant, that are promoting co-responsibility, promoting a foreign policy with feminist solutions to advance in the cooperation and progressive fiscal approaches. For example, the World Financial Organization, that's something we're doing from the UN, and transformative policies with systems, but also putting the rights of human beings in the center, and also the rights of the working people working in this field. So we're not only talking about services, we're also talking about a profound change in paradigm that implicates the redistribution of time and resources, power and work, so that we can move on towards that horizon that is articulating equality with sustainability, and we have called it society of care. At some point, we will talk about plurals and what was the debate at the BAL, to think about society of care where everyone can be included without leaving anyone behind in such more global world that we're living right now, a multi-global world we're living. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anna. We only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to ask each one of you just to speak for 1 minute so that we can finish quickly so that everyone can have the floor. I'm going to ask Raquel and Anna just 1 minute about the keys of what you were just talking about, the proposal of bi-regional pact of UN Women and CEPAL that was presented over the 68 CSW. If you can do that over a minute, if the rest of the panel also has the floor in order to finish their interventions. So just in 30 seconds so that Anna can also be talking about this. We see about this topic 2 key elements. The first one is for this topic to be considered consolidated as part of the political dialogues and bi-regional dialogues. Of course, in the national sphere, but also in the parliamentary sphere and the sphere of civil society, which were the ones that pushed the previous agreement. The second thing is that we should not have to wait to have that summit or political statements to have concrete instruments and tools that are going to help us to make this pact effective so that it can help our dialogue and that multi-actor pact among the parliaments and organizations of civil society to move forward towards the society of care. And also I wanted to acknowledge the support that Spain is having with the Agency of Cooperation, and UN Women has a program for cooperation and care where there is already an activity to work on this pact with the different associations. Thank you very much. Anna, please just 1 minute, very short, so that we can end up in time. Yes, we want this pact, which is already happening, to happen even more. So I'd like to say that also the EU ALC is key, and its presidency is the one who would have the mandate in the summit to push forward with this pact, which should be multi-actor and multi-agent. We have the G20, we have the next Beijing party, the ILO, and the conference on funding. So there are multilateral spaces, and we're already working on this. This publication, for example, is contribution to the pact itself, but indeed it has to be and I think which we want to be working more in the future, it's instruments for the cooperation. I think just like we have done with the Euroclimate and other instruments for the cooperation, together with the Digital Alliance, we need a rigorous, firm, and circular and moving forward pact that has specific proposals so that we don't miss the approach in this structural change, but at the same time so that we can have a line of work and dialogue and renovation in a multilateral way in which Latin America and the Caribbean and Europe have been related to. Thank you. Thank you very much to all of you. We're going to ask the last question to Julissa, Cecilia, Natalia, and Tania. The ILO created this paradigm of these 5 R's: recognizing, redistributing, repaying, reducing, and representing the work of care. But now we're facing a new paradigm that we have been talking about again, which is the possibility of a setback. How can we move forward in spite of this ghost? Julissa? Yes, thank you. So in La Coordinadora, we are clear about this specifically and clearly so that we don't fall on those kinds of setback that you were talking about. The agenda for care has to work, and it has to work with state pacts. How can we do this? I think we have had several hints in previous speeches, in the dialogues, and everything that has to do with that idea of information, that multi-agent factor, so that we can discuss and get deeper in what we think about care, and of course promoting those institutional consensus that are also political and social, so that we can generate, as I said, in promoting that commitment with a comprehensive system of care in which that sustainability and that idea of sustaining life should be in the center, but also in that analysis of what's the kind of care we're giving. We have to request from the people who are demanding. We need to have high quality care, but also the other side, who are the people who are offering those kinds of care so that they can have that care as well. For example, people working in homes, women working in homes, were saying that something that makes you reflect, which is who takes care of the people who take care of others. And in this sense, when I was talking about the pacts, state pacts, in these kinds of consensus, it's key to take into account that it can be protected against a political change that can be negative, and it can stop the advances that are happening in the implementation of those pacts of care that we want to implement. The key question: who takes care of the people who take care of others? Even the comprehensive care feminist pact that we have learned from Central America and the Caribbean. Also, Cecilia, how can we take care of others in this scenario of setbacks? The possibilities of instrumentalization and the possibilities of using the same words but to create different effects than the one that has been thought from ethics of care. Well, I think first thing we need to say is that we need this to be culture. We need for things to happen and for regulations not to be the most important thing. They can change, but the culture should not be changed. That's what you need. You need resistance. That's the same thing that we should be talking about, the rights to sexual rights and reproductive health care rights. They need to be culture. And in the same sense, I'd like to talk about 2 things. First thing is to stop thinking individually and start thinking collectively. We need to build this collectively, because we always think about how we can solve, or how I can solve, the topic of care from my job, from my country, but we need to think about this collectively. That's first thing. Secondly, we have to solve this from top to bottom. The way to stop setbacks, you know it because you're pushing this, is to talk about this on a European level with an alliance, with a signatures and everything that's being mobilized, and also from the bottom with mutual support. I want to talk about mutual support. It's something that is born from social movements, and it's radical, it's resistance. It sometimes has a very specific goal, but it opens up horizons for broader things. I am assisting someone that has a specific one-time need, and it's a support that I need to have for that person, and we're creating many more horizons and collective vision. So I think we need to go in the top and in the bottom. Okay, yes, the horizontal idea of care as a collective mission. For example, for those, that are cooking in canteens, in popular canteens. And Natalia, for you, how do you think we can face after having such a hunger for progress? How can we face a scenario in which we can have setbacks? Thank you, Luciana. You were talking about the ghost of setbacks. In the case of people with disabilities, that setback happened, and it was a reality over the pandemic. People with disabilities, we thought we had conquered the exercise of our human rights, and over the pandemic, we were left behind, not only behind, but very much far away. And in order so that we don't fall into another R, which is the repetition of this kind of events happening again, I think we have to put the focus on an element that is picked up in this study, which has also been made practical over the commitment of Buenos Aires, and is also picked up in the European policies for care and for disability, and the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities also reflects, and it also ratifies it as a human right. And also from the Office of the High Commissioner for United Nations, we work on this perspective, and it is to implicate organizations from the spectrum of the civil associations for the organizations of people with disabilities in these discussions and these debates in creating this bi-regional pact. In the incorporation, as I said in previous participation, in the perspective of disability, in all perspectives of disability, I think counting with these organizations and this agenda is, first of all, something that's necessary, and second of all, I think it has an essential impact. Thirdly, as I said, we're talking about rights, but at the same time, it also has an impact, as I said before, in the tax space. I think there are different elements that are being mentioned with regards to how the exercise with regards to the tax space and specifically to the participation of people with disability in those exercises can have an important and interesting effect in order to give visibility in this agenda. I think that that incorporation is not just that participation from the organizations of people with disabilities, not just the participation that it's, let's say, merely for the idea of showing up, but it can create a transformation in the bi-regional pact of care. And an element that I think it's also important to highlight in this reflection, it's the distance that there has been from the adoption of the Convention of the Rights of People with Disabilities and the reflections on rights both in Latin America and the Caribbean and in the European Union, which is the distance because of the fear of not falling in that overprotection and that objectification or instrumentalization of people with disabilities in the agenda for care. It's a distance that wanted to care, and it went such to the idea of taking care of the people who take care and the people who need help. I think we need to create a cohesion here, coexistence, because I think we need to incorporate that social perspective in that approach for care, because we have a lot to say and a lot to reflect on collectively. Well, I loved this idea, which is this R that we can also include, which is reflecting with a presence and not with a setback and not with the repetition that Natalia was also saying. Okay, Tania, also in a very short time, could you tell us what you can do from Latin America, from Southern America? What can we do so that this pact of care does not suffer a setback? Well, Luciana, I think it's important to recover what from a long time ago social and civil society have been working on. It's this topic which is nothing for us without us. That logo makes us reflect on why we're talking about this and from where we're talking about the sustainability of life. And I think what the ILO is thinking about these 3 Rs, that what it does is to request conditions to care, to take care of others, to self-care, and be taken care of makes us reflect on how our states, beyond just giving a response towards the fostering policies with regards to decent work, because it has to be requested, of course, and we have to ask for that, and we have to strengthen other kinds of measures. It also makes us think about actually what are we talking about when we talk about sustaining life in a society in which more and more we are promoting the avoidance of care. What we said before, for example, the migration processes are going to solve crisis in a capitalist system that is making us think that caring, first of all, is very expensive, that we have to invest a lot of time in it, so I should just not do it. When I think in Latin America, we still maintain this fact and this idea of this collectiveness, that the idea of not setting back makes us not look into that. We are moving forward with policies that have to do with social well-being and work well-being and labor well-being, necessary conditions for life, but also strengthening the space that is going to make it easier and necessary for the space of social civil society. Many of the progress that we have had have been thanks to that action that has taken the civil society, thanks to their proposals and work. And unfortunately, not only in Latin America, but also in general logics, we are reducing the space for civil society, for the organizations, social organizations, and mainly for funding for feminists by widening our regard, especially for the private company. I think that's a topic that we need to reflect on, and indeed it has to be considered in the bi-regional pact for care, with the idea of strengthening the articulated work and the alliance with civil society. And again, nothing for us without us. Well, Tania, thank you very much. That was excellent. I'm very thankful for this roundtable, for the previous roundtables, for the whole learning that we have had, for the research, because it has excellent data. And of course, the work for the La Coordinadora towards the pact and bi-regional pact towards care. I want to talk about specific highlights, recovering the ancestral philosophy of well-being and welfare, acknowledging the people who have cared and those who have hired societies for care, migrants, those who take care of others, self-care, collective care, feminist movement, social movements, understanding that without budget, we also don't have policies that we can move forward with. Also, we have to take into account setbacks and other possible traps in our path towards a bi-regional pact. We also need to talk about the politics and also public policies. And when we talk about public policies, there are other sectors. And it's also very important to take into account the idea that fighting tax evasion can even give more budget so that we can have care policies and also tax evaders for care. There's usually very often those men that are not doing their care duties, and we could also call them care evaders. There are other people who are also over caring. So I think that word is essential, and the budget and policies so that we can advance towards that bi-regional pact for care. So thank you all very much.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Ahora podemos ir a tomar algo para también cuidarnos y
So
hablar.
now we can go to the cocktail area, which is also a part of this, to have space of being calm so that we can talk quietly. So thank you very much. Well, I hope we can also join a calm space and not having another meeting. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. It was a pleasure to share this time with you. It was a privilege. Thank you. Likewise.